Welcome to Leadership Forward, where you'll meet Arizonans with innovative answers to our state's greatest challenges. I'm Dawn Wallace from the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flynn Foundation. Well, I'm excited to welcome Gina Roberts to the podcast. She is the Voter Education Director for Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission and a 2019 Flynn Round Fellow. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm so happy to be here. This is so fun. I'm so excited.
Well, we've known each other a long time. So, this is not my typical interview because I've known you and we're friends and things like that. But I'm also have a particular interest in your work because I spent so many years of my life in and around sort of the political community, and all of my jobs really depended on the outcome of an election.
Right.
And so I have a vested interest in how those elections are administered and the type of individuals that we encourage to be part of our political community. So, I want to start with, I always like to ask the fellows to give me like their origin story. Like, how was their journey into what you do today? I mean, typically people will say, I know I want to do this from an early age, and here's my very linear route. And then there are other people who are like scatter plots who've gone over here, over here, over here, over here, and then they found their way. What really got you into the work that you're doing now? What was your journey?
Sure. I like the origin story, right? I always think, though, it's some villainous, but the origin story for myself, I didn't really think, I want to go work in elections. I'm not sure anybody actually really thinks that, or who finds themselves in the elections field. I knew that I wanted to be involved in public policy somehow, in government somehow. I wanted to be a public servant. I just wasn't exactly sure where my passion was within that. So I went to ASU, I got my degree in political science. And then at that point, I was just trying to find, how do I get my foot in the door somewhere? Where am I going to land, between the different levels of government? Where do I see myself fitting in? And I was really lucky. This was just, I can't believe how lucky I was that I had an opportunity to go work for the city of Peoria in the city clerk's department. They hired me to do their elections. And I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. The lucky part of that, though, was the person who hired me. She happened to be a former state election director. And at the time, she knew everything that there was to know about elections. She knew all of the people in the state. She just was the best contact for if you were going to have a career in elections. She was the person to know. So I was really grateful where I had the opportunity to learn directly from her. She taught me everything that I know about elections, introduced me to all of the people across the different counties at the state. And so it just, it flourished into a career there. And so working with her, I had the opportunity to actually go to the Secretary of State's office. They recruited me. So that was really fantastic. Mm-hmm. Going there was very exciting, jumping from local level to state government, just seeing how elections work from that point of view. And then after a few years there, I was then recruited to come to Clean Elections. And I took that opportunity. I was excited to see, what could I make of this? And here I am. So just having that chance to be mentored by that person, it changed my career path.
It sounds like a straight path, right? You started with that context of understanding, the political systems, and then you found this sort of serendipitous experience into city government, which I think, to be quite honest, is where the real work happens,
yes,
right? Local government.
I love city government. So much happens there. And I was just always so amazed. And I would get involved in every single department there. I would just, I want to learn how, water works. I want to learn how our trash and services, works, how our first responders work. So I got to learn so much about public service and how government works for the people, especially at the local level, and that direct impact it has, which I think by learning that at a city, at that local government, it's helped me so much in my goal with elections and getting people to participate.
Well, as a sidebar, you know from the onset that Flynn Brown was envisioned to be this sort of straight shot into state elected office, and that hasn't really borne out because of a variety of reasons. But what we have seen is this sort of explosion of individuals wanting to seek local government positions as a stepping stone to going into state level service or state level politics. So, and they all tell me, all of the mayors and council people, they tell me it's the best education. And it's also the closest relationship you have, governance relationship you have, because you're so close to the people.
Absolutely.
Right? And everything you do directly impacts someone's life. I don't know if that necessarily is an experience that state level people have, is, you know, to have that very direct relationship.
I think that's everything you said is 100% accurate. And what that makes me think of, which I think is so interesting, and I would really endeavor, I hope to see that we see this changed on, is everything that you just said, that direct connection. But yet we have the lowest turnout in voting in those local elections. And so, you know, why is that? Why is that? And so that's something we always struggle with and work to educate our voters about. Those local elections are so important. Voting for your school board member, voting for your city council member, for mayor. I mean, they just really do have such a direct impact on a citizen's life.
Well, I was going to start with some soft questions before we got to the why don't people vote question. But so let's I'm very linear. So let's just take this linear. So we know sort of your path, and we know that you landed at this clean elections. So let's start giving the audience a level set. What is clean elections? What is its origin story? Like, why do we have that here in Arizona? Because it doesn't exist in every other state, right?
That's
it's
right.
a very unique part of our elections system.
Yes. Clean elections is very unique across the country. So it was actually, we are a state agency. I think that's very important to clarify. And we were created by voters in 1998 through a citizens initiative. So we've been around for a while, but I think it's important to know, one, the reason why we were created, and two, what the commission looks like today. So 1998, again, citizens initiative, voters were out there passing petitions to get signatures to qualify for the ballot for the Clean Elections Act. And it made the ballot, voters approved it, and we are now part of state statute. We are part of state government. And the role of the commission, the Clean Elections Act, really has three pillars in it. So the first pillar is we offer this public financing option. And during the time when this initiative was being passed around, this is coming off of the ASCAM scandal here in Arizona. So the thought was, we need to have this opportunity to look at how do we break the connection between special interest groups and those who are serving in office. How can we have these clean campaigns so that candidates can focus on the issues, that we can have issue-oriented campaigns? So that was one component. The other pillar would be campaign finance enforcement. So with that public funding comes the enforcement of it, the transparency of it, making sure that those public dollars are being used within the law, within the rules. And then the third component, which is the component that I work under, is voter education. And I really think that third pillar is really the heart of the Clean Elections Act, because when you look at our preamble, it talks about promoting participation in the political process. That's the goal. And that can be done a number of ways. But ultimately, the goal here is to showcase that voters, you can participate. Here's everything that you need to know. We do education and outreach for it. Candidates, if you want to run for office, here's a mechanism to do so. Here's one option that you can consider. And all of this leads to, again, that promotion of participation in the political process, but ultimately so that we can have candidates and voters focus on the issues. And I think that's a very critical component of the Clean Elections Act.
So we're going to spend a good portion of this talking about sort of voter demographics, how we target voters, what our goals are really to get them educated and aware, and then how does that translate into behavior, right? But just touching upon that first pillar around, I think that there's a lot of data that shows that Arizonans and probably people across the country have just this distrust or discontent with their elected leaders. And I think that I was around in 1998. The idea is that we had too many sort of bought candidates, right? They would get majority of their funding from a corporate entity or a special interest, and that the common person couldn't really afford to run for office when it was purely on fundraising. So the mechanism, just to kind of give audience, the mechanism is that when you run clean, that you are there's an equitable opportunity for funding a campaign, so that if someone isn't clean and they can fundraise and bring in money from different organizations, that the clean candidate would be at least equitable in terms of being able to use the same level of resources to be able to buy mailers and things like that. Is that accurate, or is there nuance to it?
I think, I don't know that it's equitable, and just because of where we are today with, the value of a dollar and how much funding that the clean elections funding option provides. So that was certainly, I think, the intent. But I think the purpose of this is, okay, so when you're running for office, when you decide I want to be a candidate, ultimately your goal is to, one, get on the ballot, and then two, get elected. So the thought is, how are you going to finance your campaign? Because you need to have money to do that. You have to let the voters know who you are. You have to communicate with them. You have to tell them what your platforms are. You have to try to get their vote. So you need resources to do that. So do you go out and fundraise as a traditional candidate? And in doing so, you could open the doors to, am I going to take this special interest money? And then, what does that ultimately look like? And so then the other opportunity is, if I maybe don't want to do that route, or maybe I don't think that, because I'm brand new, I don't have name recognition, I maybe don't have those contacts, I don't know if I can successfully fundraise through that manner. Here is this public financing option where if I can showcase that I have the support of the people in my district through a qualification process, then I will get a check from the Clean Elections Fund to sustain my campaign. And that at least gives you an option. It gives you the ability to run, but I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's definitely a level playing field, just because of the limitations on the funding for a publicly financed candidate as opposed to a traditionally financed candidate. So I think ultimately it's an option. It's a pathway forward. One of the things that we commonly see are candidates who are running for the Corporation Commission. They usually use clean elections funding because if you think about it, the role of a corporation commissioner,
right.
they regulate. Exactly. And who are they regulating? So who would that traditionally financed candidate get their donations from? And so there's sometimes it lends itself to the transparency of it, because clean candidates do have more reporting requirements. We audit not just their campaign finance reports, but their actual banking, their checking accounts. So we look at every single cent. So you just have to look at it from that perspective. It's an option. It's just a different pathway forward. But again, that's really, it comes down to, what is my ability to fundraise? And this is a strategic decision that I need to make. And I think that's where we are with the program today.
Well, and that's how it's evolved from when it started and now today, where those three pillars, maybe the first pillar was maybe the biggest presence of it. But today, there's no question that, and here's where I segue to the amazing work that you do, is the voter education work, because that's what is front and center now with clean elections and what we see from the outside as being the sort of external facing work that you do. So there's that pillar. What are the components of that in your work? Like, what is voter education mean to you in terms of activities and functions?
Sure. So again, we always go back to the Clean Elections Act, what the voters intended. And we have very specific criteria in there about two functions we're required to do. We have to send out a voter education guide that goes to every household with a sure. It's a guide that goes to every household with a registered voter, and what we put in there are general information about voting. But then we also have a list of the candidates that are running for statewide and legislative office. So as a voter, directly to your mailbox, you get this guide, and it showcases the photograph of the candidate, their website, their party, their funding type, and then you get their biography and a 200-word statement written directly by the candidate. So there's that component. And then we sponsor candidate debates. So with that, and then in addition to all of the other work that we do in the voter education pillar, again, this goes back to the Clean Elections Act and our preamble of promoting that participation in the political process. So this is how we meet that intention of the voters. So I think we're pretty well known for that voter guide and for our debates, and we continue to talk to voters about what are your voter education needs. We do surveys with them. We host focus groups. One of the reasons why we actually expanded what we do with our voter guide and including more information is because voters trust it. They've told us this is one of the number one resources that we look to, that we expect, and that we trust for voting information. And so it's coming directly to your mailbox. And, I don't want to go too far off the path, but Dawn, voters today, there's so much information coming at them. They're inundated with political messaging. Arizona alone for this year, over $800 million will be spent on political messaging. So you think about how that's going to impact a voter, from everything that they're seeing in their mailbox to all, those glossy mailers, to the campaign ads on TV, to everything that's getting them on social media. How do you figure out what information can I look at that's really not trying to sway my vote, but is just trying to educate me? So here we have that voter guide. And again, going back to what I talked to about those issue-oriented campaigns, this is an opportunity for the candidates to talk directly to the voters without, third-party interference here. We're not looking at, okay, who actually said this, or who was this ad paid for by, or things like that. So it's a direct connection from the candidates to the voters so that they can learn more about them.
So, I mean, it used to be, not to, make myself sound like an old lady, but it used to be that when you did get information, it was so clearly delineated between like a political entity delivering that information to you and maybe a trusted news outlet or some sort of, nonpartisan, non-agendized organization. But now you can get stuff from the Center for, fair elections and, good candidates. And it sounds like it's a, nonpartisan thing, but then you dig down and you realize there's somebody funding it, right? So, and I think that's why voters do, and I think coming to their homes and having it there as they're, filling out ballots, and that's the other part of it, is so many Arizonans vote by mail that it's kind of nice to have an instructional tool to do that. So
sure,
we use it in our house as well. But it
good.
is,
I love hearing that.
And candidates, even the non-clean candidates, see that as a value.
Yes, all the candidates are very familiar with that process, and we actually, all of our local candidates would love to be included in the guide too. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, we can only print the statewide and legislative ones, but our website. Website, we have candidates on our website right now who have created profiles. So you can see candidates running for mayor, again, running for, school districts, running for all types of local offices, justice of the peace, things like that. So our website supplements that voter guide, and it's a wealth of information. And I'm trying really hard not to go down the pathway of why media literacy skills are so important. But, that especially in this day and age of misinformation, it's really important to understand who is giving you this message. Right. And so, again, that's why with clean elections being around for so long, it is a trusted resource for voters.
Well, so talk about the debates, because that is a little bit more like public facing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So every clean elections candidate must participate in a debate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you're in the debate business, right? Because the folks you're supporting. So tell me about that. Tell me how it comes about. And then talk about some of the sort of struggles with being that nonpartisan entity, but having to put together debates that then bring about sort of that political...
Yeah.
I don't know, political chaos.
Of course. I love debates. I mean, I think we're just looking at our culture, debates have always been a healthy part of our history of how we communicate. And I think the people that wrote the Clean Elections Act were actually just very intuitive and smart, and could really just foreshadow a lot. So, but with debates, yes, if you're a clean candidate, you have to run, you have to participate in the debates. But we have seen such great turnout from all candidates because it's an opportunity, again, where we are giving that direct connection between the candidate and the voter. So we have our debates for statewide office, such as Corporation Commission. We also do legislative races. And this year we're expanding. So we have debates for congressional candidates, for U.S. Senate, and for some county races, too, for some of those local races. I'm getting emails from candidates who are saying, hey, can you do a debate for my mayoral race? I'm like, that's fantastic. So I'm seeing that candidates want these. They want to participate. The voters are asking for them. Hey, when is this race? When are you having a debate here? So we definitely see the need for it, the want for it. producing debates is so much work, Dawn. It is so much work. It's a lot of work because we have to make sure that, one, it's meaningful for both the voter and the candidate, because we're asking candidates, okay, your campaign time is valuable. We're asking you to come on stage and just speak off the cuff about these important issues. So we have to make sure that we set them up in a way that, again, they're meaningful, but they're professional, and they're appropriate. So how do we decide what those discussion points are, right? What are we going to be talking about during these debates? We go back to voters. We did a poll. We talked to voters and say, what are the issues that are important to you that you want us to discuss in these debates? And we also ask voters to submit their questions. So right now, voters across the state can submit any question that they want to, and we will take those and we'll share them with our moderators. And we present those to the candidates during the debate. And the big component of how do you have a successful debate really comes down, I think, to having a strong moderator. So here's a great opportunity that we had this year. We have this partnership with the Arizona Media Association, which represents about 300 brands across the state of Arizona. And they all have the ability to pick up our debate. So we're seeing the debates right now being broadcast on TV. We're seeing, you can look on Channel 5, Channel 3, Channel 10. We're getting inquiries from CNN and from ABC News who want to pick up the debates. And we also have them available streaming through YouTube, and you can watch them on AZ Central being streamed on there. You can hear the audio on KTAR. You can hear, you can go to your local media brand and you can see our debates because they have access to it. So through partnerships like this and making those connections, which is why Flynn Brown is so important, and having that network.
We'll get to that.
We have this great opportunity with the Arizona Media Association to make these debates as accessible as possible to voters across the state. So we recognize, we have such diversity in our geography here. So how do we reach voters who are in Metro Phoenix as opposed to who are maybe up on Navajo Nation, in that area? So how do we connect with them and make sure that our debates are accessible?
Well, so you polled voters and you just said you asked them what's important to you. Presumably, you then sort of do the analytics on, what's important to youth, what's important to, folks in rural Arizona and all the different communities we have, very distinct communities, our Native American or Latino or African American. So how do you devise a comprehensive strategy for voter engagement in terms of, because we started this whole thing with, why don't people vote? Where's our voter turnout? So that's part of your mandate, really, is to provide education so that there will be at least the tools and the resources for individuals to meet their civic responsibility. And I use that term very, very, very deliberately, to engage in democracy by voting. How do you devise these strategic tools like a comic book or, a website or whatever it is? Is it deliberate, or do you just kind of throw whatever you can at it and just hope that there's some critical mass?
It is absolutely deliberate. We do our research. We spend a lot of time engaging and investing in research, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, whether we are getting together stakeholders. So, for example, for our debates in 2023, we put together a debate work group where we had stakeholders come together and review our process and make recommendations for changes. Those stakeholders were members in the media, candidates, campaign consultants, voters, regular voters, get out the vote groups. So we had as many people as possible come together to really be representative and have a say in how our debates go forward. With our research, we absolutely look at the different demographics. So we need to know what's going to motivate or be an obstacle for somebody who's 18 to 24-year-old to vote, or what are we seeing from people who are 60 plus, or our Gen Z or millennials. So we absolutely, and where are they too? What location are they in? So the voting process, there may be barriers or challenges for somebody who is in Apache County as opposed to somebody who is in Pima County for the voting process. We have to look at all of that and devise a voter education and outreach plan that really addresses all of those motivators and those challenges. So I'll give you an example with the Apache, Coconino, and Navajo County, right? We're looking at counties where we see tribal communities, and we know that non-standard addresses are an issue. So how do I get my printed voter guide to those households where they have non-standard addresses to make sure that all voters have access to it?
I mean, non-standard in that in tribal communities, there are no street names.
Right. You're not seeing 123 East Main Street. You're seeing, okay, 2 miles west past the boulder with the red fence on it and then turn right. You're seeing those types of directions for how did those people, how are they located? How are their residences located? So we have to adapt to that. So what we do instead is we still send out our voter guides to the mailing addresses that are on file for those registered voters, but we also make sure that we supply stacks of them to the post offices that service those communities. We send them to the chapter houses. We work with the radio stations that service those communities as well to do radio reads, whether it's in English or in the language of that community, such as Dene for our Navajo Nation. We are running ads in the movie theaters where we know that the Navajo Nation community goes to see their movies. And so it's just, again, meeting people where they are and understanding what those obstacles are. Going back to our 18 to 24-year-olds. 18-year-olds and above who are
God bless 18-year-olds
who are at college right now. They need a lot of help. And so every voter is different. And why they need help is because where is their permanent residence? Am I coming to school? Am I going to ASU out of state? Do I actually live in Colorado? And is Colorado my permanent address? And is that where I want my ballot to reflect? And if that's the case, I've got to contact Colorado to mail my ballot here. Or, you know what? No, I should be registered here in Arizona because I consider this my permanent home. And I need to register to vote now. And that 18-year-old gets registered to vote in Arizona. And then I get a phone call from mom in Colorado saying, why did you do that? Because now my son or daughter, they just changed their residency status and now it's impacting a scholarship. And so we get all of these situations.
Gina.
And so we have to help them and guide them through that. And also if you are voting, if you do decide to register to vote here, where are you living? Are you in a dorm? Do you have access to your birth certificate so that you can provide that citizenship proof when you're registering and get a full ballot? Do you have the proper ID to go to the polling place? Because your student ID probably won't cut it. So going through all of those different mechanisms of the voting process with our 18, our newest voters, it's a lot. So there's a great amount of voter education that's needed there. And we have to figure out, okay, are we talking to students at U of A and NAU and our community colleges? And how do we connect with them and give them those resources and address those issues that we know impact them so that they can get their ballot cast?
Well, that's the mechanics of voting. But then you have the other side of it, which is the apathy, right? We do a lot of work with youth through our civic program, and they don't quite believe their vote matters, right? So there's a lot of work that we have to do as the adults in the room to kind of, sort of dispel some of the stuff that's coming at them and what they're hearing, the media literacy. We'll do a whole conversation on media literacy.
I know.
All right, I have a couple of things to ask you before we finish, and I want to start with election integrity, but I don't really want to talk about, machines and Sharpies and anything like that. I want to talk about the fact that our election system is dependent on a workforce that's knowledgeable, that is consistent, that is free from sort of political influence. And what we have seen a lot of, and we did our whole convention last year was celebrating public service, but understanding that there's some significant challenges. Mm-hmm. And there's a crisis in this country as it relates to people's respect for people who serve, whether it's teachers or nurses or doctors or elections workers. So since you've been essentially in the elections workforce your entire adult life, tell me if we are in a crisis as it relates to not having a good bench of people to come in and protect the integrity of our elections by making sure the mechanics of our elections are being done in the best way in the best way. That's a long way of saying, do we have the people in place or have we scared them off?
There's so much there to unpack and address. And so to your specific question, I think we are at a critical point right now in terms of ensuring that we have the workforce for elections. we did see what has been called a mass exodus of election officials since 2020 who have just left because typically, like as you said, I have my entire career has been in elections. You see that. Once you're in elections, you're in it because you either love it or you don't and you leave right away. And so if you stay and you're in it for the long term. And to be that type of election official, it means that you're acquiring all of this knowledge. You know things. You know why they've been done in the past. You know best practices. You know, when you are administering elections, obviously we have state statute and our procedures that we have to follow and implement, but also having that institutional knowledge, it's critical because that's how you can help communicate to the public, to people who are questioning the integrity of the election. You can explain this is why it's done this way. So the workforce losing all of these people, it has had an impact. We have seen, I think it's 11 out of our 15 counties that have a new elections director for this year. And so having these, new people who are coming in, it's great because we want people to engage in a profession as an elections official, but we are also looking at a massive loss of institutional knowledge. So we, thankfully, we have a great state where all of our counties are really good about working together and communicating together. But we also have to look forward to how do we recruit new elections officials and how do we train them and educate them on the process so we can build up that workforce again and have a sustainable pipeline, too, of this workforce. And so, the Secretary of State's office right now, they are doing this program with all of our 15 counties where they have this fellowship program to bring in people. They can get a stipend and they can work. And the goal is to ultimately create, a career-long elections officials out of them. I have the pleasure of being an adjunct faculty at the University of Minnesota in working in their certificate in election administration program, which is fantastic because that is a starting point for people who want to get involved in elections to come in and learn the basics about election administration, about election security, about, voter participation, which is the course that I teach. And so looking to that pipeline, we really have to do something to make sure that we can recruit and that we can retain and have that sustainability. Because again, we did reach this point of this exodus of losing that institutional knowledge. And so we have to build that up right now. So, but it's okay. Again, the people who are working our elections right now, again, we still have folks who have that long history. A lot of my colleagues are still here. So I know all our elections going forward, I have full faith in them, but workforce is definitely something we need to address.
Well, it's amalgamous with the teaching profession. Nick Vasquez was here and he was talking about the mass exodus of nurses. I mean, it's a phenomenon that's happening in a lot of public service. But I mean, I think ultimately at the end of the day, public service is still a calling of a lot of really amazing people like Flynn Brown Fellows. And here's where I'm going to segue, unless you want to say something.
I have so much I want to say. I wish I had so much more time. Because part of this too, it goes, I think, back to our civic education and, having a strong civic education for our children, we're really helping to shape them as good citizens, right? And so if they have a better understanding of how local government works and state government works and federal government works, if they understand how government is meant to be for the people, I think that's going to have a positive impact on how they treat their public servants and the relationship that they build with them, because they now know if I'm struggling or I have an issue, I know who to contact. And the other part of that too is, you had mentioned the thought of, well, maybe my vote doesn't count. How do we measure if a vote doesn't count, or does a vote matter? So obviously we know the physical aspect of counting a ballot, right? I think that's pretty clear. And so that's just a transparency, educational aspect of showcasing to the voter, this is how you track your ballot and confirm it was accurately counted. But then does my vote matter? And I think that is a very important question, because I think one of the things that I like to say is, democracy doesn't end at the ballot box. If I am an engaged citizen, and if I believe in civic engagement, and I have that civic education background, once I cast my ballot, I'm not done there. I'm going to write a letter or an email to the people that are representing me on the issues that they're considering voting on. I'm going to tell them why I think this is important. I'm going to tell them what I need as a citizen in my neighborhood. I'm going to tell them these are the services that I need. I want our libraries to be fully supported because I believe in taking my children there. Or, I have concerns about first responders or my trash services, or this is what I think about the state budget. So understanding the roles of the elected officials and how to communicate with them and continue to engage engage with whoever is elected, even if I didn't vote for them. That is also civic engagement. And I think it's important too. And I think building that relationship with government between the people, that's where I think we see maybe those more positive treatment of public servants come through.
Well, it's civic leadership, right? So Flynn Brown Fellow 2019, you can still see Academy in your rearview mirror. How did it help you? And then do you use the network? Do you use the other 464 people that have this moniker of Flynn Brown? And how does that sort of aid in the work that you do?
Sure. And I'm not saying this just because I'm here, but I'm saying this because
you're contractually obligated to say it.
I know. Can my fellowship be revoked? But I think it's going through Flynn Brown, going through the Academy was truly one of the most impactful moments of my career. And the reason why it has had such an impact and it has been such a benefit to me, one is the network, but two, also just having that viewpoint of learning. Again, it's more of that civic education too, right? Learning how our government works and learning about public policy, but also learning how to have those difficult conversations, right? Public policy is talking about issues that evoke emotion, that are sensitive, that impact us all. And so with that comes, how do we have those difficult conversations? How does that translate into debates? How do I structure that conversation? But also too, using the network in ways that I never would have imagined. When COVID hit, I knew people in the network who were in the healthcare community. So that means that I was able to connect with those people to talk about the safety and security of our poll workers at the polls, and how do we keep our poll workers and our voters safe during COVID when they actually choose to go out and vote in person. So having that, in the education community right now, in our K through 12 and post-secondary, those people in the network, those are helping me in my civic education outreach efforts to connect with our future voters and our future candidates. So the network has really just... I've used it in ways that I couldn't even imagine that I would be using it. And I think that's been tremendously helpful.
Well, that's a great testimonial. So I have taken a lot of your time and it's election year. So you giving me 35 minutes is a gift. But I'm going to end with this. I know you're a Harry Potter fan. A little birdie told me. Which house?
Ravenclaw. Come on. Is there any doubt?
Way.
What did you think?
Okay, I don't know. I thought Flynn Brown Fellows are overachievers. I thought maybe it might be Gryffindor, but that's okay. Ravenclaw's fine. Hufflepuff would be okay too, but no Slytherin. Thank you so much, Gina, for joining us on the podcast and for being such an exemplary example of a civic leader and such a great friend to the Flynn Brown Network. And it's just been a joy to talk to you today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Dawn. Thank you.
That wraps up this episode of Leadership Forward. You can find out more about the work of the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at our website, azcivicleadership.org.